Military life. It's definitely not for everyone. Imagine you met the man of your dreams. You're a successful nurse, and your husband is a decorated sergeant in the Air Force. You have 2 beautiful children together, but before your 30th birthday, someone with their own selfish desires and plans not only ruins your life, but takes it from you. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kimbyrleigha. If you've never been here before, nice to finally meet you. I am so glad that you're here with me today. This is going to be one of my shorter videos while I'm prepping for my next deep dive. And I want to give a big thanks to one of our new sponsors, MyHeritage. I had so much fun exploring their family history and DNA service, which is #1 in Europe. And I decided to have my daughter Shyla join in on the fun because I was so curious as to what we would find out together. So these are our little kits. There's also a clear step-by-step. All you have to do is swab each of your cheeks inside for 30 seconds. This reminds me when investigators make you do the cheek swab for your DNA. Another important aspect of MyHeritage is their commitment to the user's privacy. They never sell or license your genetic DNA. You are the sole owner of your DNA data, and that makes me feel good and secure using their service. Put it inside here. Snap. And then there it is. And place the vials in the plastic bag and insert it into the enclosed envelope. So we're going to put the vials in here, and then we're going to put it in the envelope. Then you mail the vials to their lab and you receive your results within 3 to 4 weeks. Okay, we'll be back to tell you what our results are. Are you excited?
Yeah.
A really cool thing that you can do while you're waiting for your results is you can use their photo features. You can enhance and colorize and even animate your old family photos, or you can build out a family tree. So we got our results back finally. Are you excited?
Yeah.
I love how easy it is to locate your new relatives, and it's exciting. You never know what you're going to learn when you log on and explore your family history.
Wait. What if I'm...
What, switched at birth?
Yeah.
You weren't. I don't think you were. Okay, so I got an email before I even saw my results. I haven't even seen my results yet. And it says, review your DNA match. 94.5 shared DNA suggests the following estimated relationship. Daughter. Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
I wasn't switched at birth, guys.
So here's my Italian percentage, and it's 56.8%. And my 28% is East European. And then my next one that I haven't known about yet was Irish, Scottish, and Welsh. I am 6.8% West Asian. And then the last one is Central Asian. So I'm Central 2.5% Central Asian. Are you ready for yours?
Yes.
Okay, wow, this is interesting.
What?
Okay.
Oh my God.
She's all over the place. Okay, she's 28% English, United Kingdom. She's 18.2% Italian.
That's crazy.
Interesting going from like how much I am to like how much you are. 17.8% North and West European, 10% Iberian, and then you're 9% East European.
Why am I like everywhere? Was I like...
Wow, you're 15% West Asian.
Wow.
So did you have fun doing this? Because I did. Yeah. I love finding out things that I didn't know about myself and my relatives. I think it's really cool. I really love the site. It's really easy to use. It was fast. Don't forget to check the description box for the link to MyHeritage and use my code Kimber. Thank you so much for being my lovely assistant and participant for this sponsorship. Look in the description box below to buy a DNA kit of your own at my link and use the code Kimber for free shipping as an added bonus. You can start a 30-day free trial of MyHeritage. It's the best subscription for family history research, and enjoy 50% off if you decide to continue. Now let's get into the case for today. We are not talking about a case from a small town this time. This story takes place in San Antonio, Texas. It's in the deep south of Texas, only about 150 miles from the Mexican border. It's a historical town. This is where the Battle of the Alamo took place back in 1836 when the Mexican troops invaded Texas, and San Antonio is one of the biggest tourist spots for anyone who wants to visit Texas. It's a beautiful city. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to see. One popular destination is this Riverwalk area where you can enjoy shopping and margaritas, little Tex-Mex cuisine, or you can ride a river taxi, which looks super fun. There's live music in the streets, lots of restaurants to enjoy. I want to actually visit. I haven't had a chance yet, but it's definitely on my list. And aside from being a top tourist destination, San Antonio is also a place that a lot of military families call home. It's actually known as Military City, USA. It's been home to a consistent military presence for close to 300 years. It has one of the nation's largest active and retired military populations. The largest military base in San Antonio is the Lackland Air Force Base. Now, I knew going into this case that I didn't know much about the military. I thought I knew enough, but I learned a lot, and I'm glad I did. And I hope that I can impart some of my new knowledge on you if you're like me and you don't have a military background. My grandfather was in military intelligence for the United States, but he died when I was young. So I did not have the experience of the military life. And it is a whole different world for those who live in it. Many of you can most likely relate. It's a very close-knit community, especially if you're on the bases. And one of the families living in San Antonio in the 80s was the Lipscombs, Kathleen and William Lipscomb, and their 2 young children. William, who went by Bill, was a high-ranking master sergeant in the Air Force at the time, and his beautiful wife, Kathleen, was a nurse. I want to introduce you to both of them, and I'll start with Kathleen. Ella Kathleen Adams was born on September 1st, 1956 in Louisiana to her mother Nadine Adams and her father Charles Leonard Adams. Ella went by her middle name Kathleen, and it was finally shortened affectionately to Kathy. So I'm going to call her Kathy in this video. Kathy had one sister, Darlene, and she and Darlene were very close, and the sisters were also very close to their mother. Kathy grew into a stunning woman. She was a petite little platinum blonde with crystal blue eyes, and she wasn't just gifted in the looks department. Kathy was very intelligent. She valued academics, and she studied to become a nurse. That was her dream. And she hadn't even gotten far on her journey into her medical career when she met William Lipscomb. Now, because this isn't one of my deep dives, I'm not going to go into detail about their childhoods, but what I do want to do is I want to focus as much as I can on what I gathered about what life was like for Kathy and William before tragedy struck. William, who I said went by Bill, was around 4 years older than Kathy. He was handsome. He was hardworking, he was a military man, and some women are even more attracted to men when they're in a uniform. And they were the perfect couple. They fell in love and they married when they were young. Kathy was about 20 and Bill was around 24. It's pretty common for individuals in the military to get married young. Sometimes it's for the benefits and other times it's for the companionship, for someone that they can come home to. Being in the military is not an easy job. It can be lonely being away for so long, and marriage allows for these men to feel like they're coming home to someone. It also has its financial benefits, like housing, increased compensation, and we won't know the full extent of the reasons why they got married when they did. But there's also the fact that being in love means you will do anything to be close to your partner. It made sense to both of them, and before they knew it, it was 1986, and they were living in San Antonio with 2 beautiful children. They had a home just a few miles from the Air Force Base. Everyone that knew the couple knew that they were a perfect match. One of the reasons is because they were both hardworking and they were attractive. They looked like Barbie and Ken. They just had that gorgeous look to them, like they just matched. He was like the tall, dark, handsome, and she was the bubbly blonde. Kathy worked as a nurse at the University of Texas Health Science Center, and she was very skilled in her field, and she was rising up in her career. Kathy was ambitious. Her plan wasn't to be stagnant and content. She wanted to continue her education and excel at many different specialties, very similar to the way Bill approached his work. This tends to bring couples together, similar outlooks on life and career, and Bill's career was taking off at a very high speed. This is what I had to learn about when it came to the military, because everything I read about Bill was extraordinary. The ranks and the titles meant nothing to me, since I didn't understand the way it all worked. But once I did, I was like, okay, wow, this man, he is like legit. He's a superstar. And you've probably heard the phrase enlisted in the military. It's the most common way that someone enters. They talk to a recruiter, they go through their basic training, and they work hard, and move up different ranks. As they do, not only are they decorated with different medals and badges on their uniforms, the uniforms also change as you move up this ladder. And not only that, the higher someone moves up in the ranks, the more responsibility, power, and authority they have. In order for us to truly know Bill, it's important we understand how this works, how he ranked up, how someone gets there, and what it entails, because I found it pretty fascinating. So let me show you the ranks in the Air Force for reference. And I will also explain for those that are just listening, here are the enlisted ranks on the top. They start with E1, which is a basic airman, and they go to E9, which is the Chief Master Sergeant. That sounds so important. And it really is. Just to understand how hard it is to get there, one statistical example shows it takes approximately 17 years to get where Bill was, and he was only 33. This man was being promoted left and right. To help me understand the complexity, I found a YouTube channel called 21 Shades of J. It's right here. I'm going to put up on the screen. He creates videos explaining how to rank up in the Air Force. He got to E6 in 6 years, and it's literally referred to as E6 in 6 because it's quite an accomplishment. It takes a lot of studying, and I had no idea. But there's something called the Weighted Airman Promotion System, and it's abbreviated as WAPS. Not to be confused with WAP, but it consists of tests that an airman has to take so they can rise up the ranks, and they're intense. I found a study guide, and it was 200 pages long. Wow. I read somewhere that Bill wasn't even 30 years old, and he was already a Master Sergeant, which is an E7 rank. He wouldn't just pass these exams, he would ace these exams. Something else about Bill stood out. His actual position in the Air Force, he was a military training instructor. And man, did I watch some interesting videos on this. This is a very important position. And I just want to point out, now we have a lot of resources. This was back in the 80s. They didn't have the resources like a YouTube video by someone who's already gone through everything and can give you advice on how to study. Everything had to be done the old school way. Instructors like this are actually looked at as one of the most important jobs in the Air Force. They are the drill instructors. They are the very first impression that an entry-level airman gets about what it means to be an American soldier. There's a lot of pride in a position like this. There's no place for mediocrity for Bill. Those below him both feared him and admired him. It was Bill's job to take these kids that were coming into the Air Force and mold them into who they will be known for the rest of their lives. These individuals will never forget their training instructor. So Bill took his job very seriously, maybe even more seriously than anything else in his life. It's what he lives for and where he finds his identity. And I'm telling you all of this because as the head of a household, and a military one at that, his status and his reputation matters, and therefore the Lipscomb's lifestyle revolved around the importance of Bill exhibiting a stellar reputation, professionalism, integrity, honor, excellence. The military life isn't for everyone, but luckily Kathy knew how to support Bill the way that he needed, and through an entirely different profession. Being a nurse, she also had to exhibit her own sense of responsibility and respect and professionalism. They made a perfect pair. The couple was looked at as a model for not only those around them who knew them intimately and admired them, but all of the airmen that came through Bill's trainings. The Lipscombs had it all. They both loved their careers and their kids, and Kathy was a doting and supportive wife, raising their 2 children while working hard during the day and caring for the children after school and on the weekends. She would attend all of the military events, all the balls, the gatherings. She even loved to cheer him on at the games he played. He was in the military softball league. But things at home were a little different. Kathy was used to being in Bill's shadow. She was okay about it, especially when they were in public, but when it came time for Bill to display interest in her work, it seemed like he almost resented her. Kathy's hospital had gotten a research grant at one point, and she was excited. She was excited about the possibility of applying for a research position, but Bill wasn't thrilled. He didn't think she needed to add any more to her plate. It was like he was okay where her career was, as though he was the one responsible for making that decision for her. It does take a certain type of person to be a drill sergeant. They can be rigid and controlling, and that may be okay on base, but it's not great for a relationship. I don't know if you can relate to this, if you've ever been with someone like this, but Kathy just felt that Bill did not take her job seriously. She felt belittled. He was used to talking to his airmen in a rough tone, and he would forget that Kathy was his wife. He would say things like, well, you just sit around and change bedpans all day or wipe people's butts, so what's important about that? And this was tough because Kathy had a lot of ambition, and she was sick of living in Bill's shadow. She loved and respected him, of course she did, but she began to become distant. If you take that again and again, you're going to retreat. There's only so much someone can take. But this caused them both to be distant and throw themselves into their work even more than their relationship at home. And this was actually a positive thing for Kathy. She wanted to do research in the OBGYN department, so she applied for the position, which required testing and a report writing and putting in samples of her work. And to her delight and surprise, Kathy gets the position, and it's a big deal for her. This is building her confidence. It gives her a sense of purpose and pride. When she gets home and she lets Bill know that her and a few colleagues are going to go out and celebrate, instead of being happy and congratulating her, he seems to resent the entire situation. But that doesn't stop Kathy. She begins her new role and she excels quickly. It's like, why can he do it and not her? I think that's my thinking. I think that's how I would feel. I've definitely been there. But we have to remember that we don't know what couples agreed to getting into the relationship. We don't know those unspoken things that are not public. We don't know if he asked her, will you be my supporting wife, stay home with the kids, I will give all the military benefits and support you. We don't know. Nevertheless, this doesn't stop Kathy. She is excited and she begins her new role and she rises up quickly. Her diligence doesn't go unnoticed. Kathy is asked to join a new research team led by one of the most prestigious doctors in the OBGYN department, Dr. David Pearl, and this is a huge accomplishment for Kathy. Dr. Pearl chooses the best of the best for his team, and he's delighted to have Kathy on board. Now she can use all of the skills that she has learned to master and showcase her expertise. And unlike Bill, Dr. Pearl, he understands the complexities involved in her specialty. He is there to provide encouragement and praise, and Kathy feels the best when she's at the hospital. It's where she feels that she belongs. Home starts to be a place that she would rather not be. And Kathy's identity was moving away from a wife and a mother to an OBGYN nurse and beyond. She intended on continuing her education, and Dr. Pearl approves. Now Kathy was choosing to spend even longer hours at work, away from Bill, but closer to Dr. Pearl, who was thankful for her hard work and her dedication. And Kathy felt appreciated and seen. When she was in his presence, it boosted her self-esteem. Now she would come home smiling and happy and on top of the world. And Bill could see that. And considering he knew he wasn't the one putting a smile on her face, he started to wonder what or who was. And at this point, as they say, they were two ships just passing in the night, because with their daily routines being so different, they weren't spending any quality time together. Instead, Kathy starts to talk to Dr. Pearl. It started with little things, as it always does, like when he would compliment her. She would be so grateful. And she let the words escape her lips. Those words. My husband doesn't say those things. So that's how this started. The way he treated her was the opposite of the way that Dr. Pearl did. Kathy was stunning on the outside, but she was also very sweet and likable and caring and generous, and the list goes on. And soon enough, she and Dr. Pearl are more than just connecting on, the professional level. They're starting to connect on a more personal one. She's now calling him by his first name, David, so I will too. Kathy and David are harmlessly flirting. I mean, it can seem harmless, but they're just building each other up here and there. And it made it feel okay, since both of them were married. Yes, David is married too. Yet he begins to confide in Kathy about the troubles that he and his wife are going through, and the two begin to bond. Sooner or later, David and Kathy are having lunches together outside of the hospital. It always starts innocent, doesn't it? It's like boundaries. I guess they did exist, but they were becoming more and more blurred. In the spring of 1986, David finally crosses the line and invites Kathy to his place. But wait, it's not the home he shares with his wife, no. Instead, to Kathy's surprise, David tells her that he and his wife are actually separated and he lives in his own apartment near the hospital. Was Kathy thinking about leaving Bill? Well, it turns out, when confiding in David, she says yes, that she was thinking about it. She had actually attempted to leave once before, but Bill wouldn't let her go. By the way, I may be the last person to know this, but I always thought when couples said that they were separated, they were just trying to work things out to stay together, work on their marriage, and they just needed some space. So I was always confused when people would say, that they were separated, but then they were open to the possibility of being with someone else. But I was on a trip last week where I met other YouTubers. By the way, I'll put their names here on the screen. I met Kennedy. She has a true crime and makeup channel. I met Emily Jean. And I met Leisha Miller. I'll put their names below in the description box. But last week I was on a trip and I ended up meeting a few other YouTubers. One was Leisha Miller, and she is a family attorney. And I learned something. I learned that separation is actually a legal part of divorce proceedings. No idea that was real. If a couple wants a divorce, they have to go through a legal separation first for a designated amount of time, which is usually defined by the particular state that they were married in. So for example, here in California, it's a 6-month period, and it varies in different states. So David and Kathy, they bond over their marriage difficulties. And David explains he's separated from his wife. The more they see one another alone, there is more and more tension building up, especially in Kathy. She hasn't been close to Bill in a while. He was so controlling and demeaning, whereas David, he was carefree and caring and gentle, and ultimately they cross the line. They end up having sex. Of course they do. If they didn't want this to happen, they should not have allowed it to get to this. Alone at David's apartment, where they're not under the watchful eyes of the colleagues and their superiors. Over the next few months, Kathy begins to fall in love with David, and it seems that David feels the same. All the while, Kathy's hiding this from Bill. But he has his suspicions, especially because there are nights that Kathy doesn't make it home until very late, after midnight, and she keeps telling him that she's working on a project, but Bill has a feeling that she is not telling the truth. Their relationship is strained. They're no longer intimate, and Kathy is just going through the motions. Bill is feeling neglected, possibly betrayed, and begins taking more and more interest in the extracurricular activities outside of his work, like his softball league. Kathy goes to his games, and she notices something different. Bill seems to be getting a little more attention than usual, and he's paying more attention than usual to all of the young cadets that he trains in the Air Force, all the young women. They're cheering him on. This is their drill sergeant, and they're laughing and smiling and hugging him. And it's getting a little too close, in Kathy's opinion, but who is she to pass judgment, right? There is a saying that 2 wrongs don't make a right. What they could have benefited from was some actual communication, but instead, both became cold and distant. Kathy was no longer interested in having sex with Bill. All she could think about was David. People in these love triangles sometimes say they feel like they're cheating on their new lover with their husbands, so they stop having sex with their husband. We can't ever know exactly what Kathy was feeling, but her actions say a lot. She considered the marriage over. Bill, on the other hand, is not catching on and not ready to let their marriage completely die. He starts questioning her about where she's going, where she's been, and this doesn't end well. It only leads to arguments. Kathy insists that she's just working and that he should stop interrogating her, but it's becoming harder and harder to keep her affair a secret, mostly because she wants more from David. She wants to be with David. And I don't mean just in his bed. She wants him to commit to her. That same spring, 1986, Kathy thinks of a plan to spend more time with her lover away from Bill, where he cannot be monitoring what's going on. She decides to register for a medical conference that David's going to, and it's 1,000 miles away. Kathy thought this would be perfect. Now she has a legitimate excuse. She didn't feel like she had to hide anything. She didn't even have to hide David. Because when they were away together, they were together. No one knew them 1,000 miles away. There was no social media in 1986 like there is now. No one was taking pictures or videos with their iPhone and sending them to someone's partner as evidence of infidelity. It's just so easy to get caught these days. It's a wonder why anyone even tries to cheat. But back then, it was as though these lovers were in their own worlds. They could walk down the street holding hands, acting like Mr. and Mrs. Dr. Pearl. Kathy was in heaven. She loved David. When he walked in a room, time would stand still. There was just something special about him. Everyone saw it, but she got to experience it, and that gave her this rush, and it didn't compare to anything else. Even though she was literally cheating with a married man, she's imagining what it would be like to be with David, be his wife. She asks him if they can be together. He tells her he loves spending time with her. It's so much fun. It feels right, but he has to wait until his divorce is final. Then, of course, they can be together. There's no question about that. Kathy felt loved. She felt cherished and listened to. She had someone to confide in and talk to about all of her problems, and she looked up to him. He taught her so much about work and just about life. She was infatuated with David. He was the complete package. He was handsome, he was smart, he was hardworking and fun, and he just gets her. When they were together, it was just like David and Kathy. They just had their thing. Everything was perfect, just as long as Bill didn't find out. But Bill wasn't oblivious. While Kathy might have been in her own little world with David, Bill's living in reality. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to put the facts together. The long hours, the smiles, the happiness not coming from him, the trips, Bill had had enough. He begins looking through Kathy's things when she's gone at that conference, and he's devastated by what he finds. And you know what? My heart really breaks for him. In this situation, he's had this aha moment, but it's also a soul-crushing moment. It confirms his worst fear, and I know that feeling all too well. Your heart starts to beat fast, you can't breathe, your body feels hot, and you get dizzy, and you can't think, and you just stare, and that is what was going on with Bill. He was staring at a packet of birth control pills. It was at that exact moment that he knew in his heart that Kathy was being unfaithful. Bill had a vasectomy. There was no need for Kathy to use contraceptives of any kind with him. She wasn't even having sex with him anyway. That's really devastating. Cheating is one of the worst betrayals in a relationship. It breaks down everything, the communication, the trust, the vulnerability, and the love. It just extinguishes love in the blink of an eye. Bill puts all of the evidence together, and it's obvious who Kathy is having an affair with. Dr. David Pearl, the distinguished medical specialist, a man who made more money than Bill and had a higher education, and that felt humiliating to him. This isn't the picture-perfect life that he wants to portray to the incoming airmen. He's crushed. This isn't just about losing his beautiful, loving wife that he adores no matter what. It's about what this will look like on his unblemished career. Everything about him was polished from head to toe. Yet now his marriage is a mess. As soon as Kathy comes home, he confronts her. She was already ready to lay it out on the table for him. She had made up her mind. She was in love with David, so she didn't lie. She didn't fight it. She told Bill the truth. She wanted a divorce. She was in a relationship with the doctor. Can you imagine the pain that Bill must have been going through to hear his wife say those words? One part of you wants that confirmation, just to hear them admit they've done something wrong. But it also becomes a reality once it's spoken. Some people can never come back from pain like that. Kathy doesn't hesitate. As soon as the conversation is over with Bill, she goes down and files for divorce. Now listen, I've talked about cheating in a lot of videos. I don't always ask your opinions on it, and there will be many of them. For one, I hear the immaturity card pulled a lot of times as an excuse. Well, she was a young woman. She was young when they got married, and fair enough, maybe she didn't have a lot of life experience, but that was a choice, and so is cheating. Sometimes I just wonder why people don't just get a divorce first. At least that's what David was doing, right? He was in the separation stage, but I guess some people may not be able to fight that lust. Thoughts? Let me know in the comments. But once the paperwork was filed, Kathy is over the moon with happiness. Unlike Bill, who is most likely crying himself to sleep at night. Kathy can't wait to share the news with David. The new arrangement between Bill and Kathy in their separation is that Kathy will move into her own apartment with the kids, probably got that clue from David, and Bill will have visitation with the children every weekend. The oldest child was about 6 or 7 years old at the time, and I could not find out any more information about their names or anything else. It was the 80s. I tried to find newspaper articles and stuff, but they kept it kind of under wraps. Things are going as well as can be expected in these circumstances. The visitations are going well. Kathy's enjoying her freedom. She's got her new apartment. And speaking of apartment, it's Sunday afternoon on June 8th, 1986. Bill has the kids and is ready to bring them back to Kathy. When they arrive at Kathy's place, her car isn't there. So they go up to the door anyway and they knock, and there's no answer. So Bill decides to go back to the car. He gets a piece of paper and a pencil, and he leaves a note for Kathy. Just to let her know the kids are safe. She wasn't home, so they went back to his place, and she can call or come get them whenever she gets a chance. Remember, there's no cell phones back then. There's no way for Bill to know where Kathy is. And she didn't tell him that she wouldn't be there. He expected her there on Sundays like she always was when he dropped off the kids. It's not like her to leave without notice or not come back on time to take care of her children. Bill is irritated, but he's not alarmed at this point. However, there are some people who are, her coworkers. Because you probably guessed that Kathy did not show up to work the next morning. That was very unusual. It was very out of character for a woman like Kathy, who not only took her job seriously, but was literally dating her boss. She would never be a no-show at work. So her friends are calling around to her family members to check in, but no one has heard from Kathy. However, just as the sun is coming up on Monday, June 9th, 1986, it reveals what Kathy's family have been looking for. In northwest Bexar County, just outside the city limits of San Antonio, a man thinks he sees something off the side of the road. It's in a rural area. This is not a heavily populated area. Police respond immediately. And when they arrive on the scene, they're confronted with a gruesome sight. There was a naked female with no identification and just her clothes next to her. It doesn't take long for police to identify the body of 29-year-old Kathleen Lipscomb. Her co-workers had been searching for her all day. They were making reports and letting the police know that they could not find her. Once it was announced that a body had been located, her co-workers were there to positively identify her. At first glance, there's not too much of the crime scene in the way of evidence. They're looking toward the body for clues. One thing that stood out to the investigators immediately was the way that Kathy's body looked. She was in a very peculiar position. It wasn't just that she was curled up in a fetal position. Her limbs were actually curled and twisted in a very unnatural position. It's something that the investigators had never seen before, and they wondered why she looked that way. They also noticed a clothesline that was right next to her body. Looking around for more and more evidence, it was pretty obvious that she had been dumped at this location. This is not where she was murdered. There was nothing really significant as far as like footwear impressions or tire marks or blood or anything like that. However, it was apparent that there were bruises and marks around Kathy's neck, which leads the detectives to believe that she suffered from strangulation, and that was probably the cause of death. But you couldn't see any other physical wounds on her body at this point. So they do transport her to the medical examiner's office to do a full autopsy. This is when some additional evidence comes to light. But before I get into those details, it's important to jump back and tell you what was going on, as far as her family and her friends finding out what happened. It can go without being said, but I will let you know as soon as her mother and her sister were contacted, they were in shock. Total disbelief about what was happening. Her sister said that there were so many emotions going through her. And there's going to be even more shocking news to come because they didn't know that Kathy had some secrets. And all of this will be coming to light as I get more and more into the story. When her friends and family are being interviewed, they immediately let police know that Kathy is going through a divorce with Bill and that he is very high up in the Air Force. Immediately, alarm bells start to go off because there was something significant at the crime scene. Something that stood out. Remember how I told you that Kathy's clothes were next to her? Well, they weren't just thrown next to her body. They were meticulously placed right next to her in a fashion that was very distinctive. They were rolled. I don't know if you've ever seen the way that individuals in the military roll their clothing so they can put them in their backpacks and other places and they can spare the room. This is called a ranger roll. I'm going to show you an example of it right here on the screen. This is, like I said, for people in the military to save room in their backpacks. You can fit a hell of a lot more in there if you're rolling up your clothes. This is a huge clue. Clearly, whoever did this must be in the military. It was a force of habit. They do it all the time, and they must have done it again in this state of mind they're in. They're rushing to drop Kathy's body off, but why even leave her clothes there? Maybe Bill has some answers because he is the first one that they call in for questioning. But as soon as they let him know what happened and that Kathy was dead, he is in shock. There was just a total look on his face like he cannot believe that this is happening. He turns white as a ghost. He doesn't understand how it can be possible. And he let them know that he and the kids went over to her apartment the night before and she was nowhere to be found. He told them about the note that he left for her, but of course, they're always going to suspect the partner. And not only that, he's in the military. So that links him right away to the way the clothing was folded and they're going through a divorce. So of course, they're going to look at the husband. And he is just distraught. He's upset. He's talking about how he's been looking all over for her and he's torn apart. And he says, I have nothing to do with it. But not only that, when they press him about the fact they know about the affair with Dr. Pearl, because they had heard it from the coworkers when they interviewed them, he said, yeah, I know that. I'm aware of the affair. I'm aware of everything that's going on and I'm okay with it. I understand. There's nothing I can do. Kathy's free to do what she wants. Those were her wishes. And that he's accepted the fact that Kathy has moved on and there's nothing he was able to do about it. The next thing they want to do though, because you know the husband's going to be the prime suspect, right? They want to see if there's anything out of the ordinary about the way he looks. Does it look like he's been scratched? Are there marks on his hands, defensive wounds, anything that would lead them to believe there was a sign of a struggle? But they couldn't find anything. There were no bruises, no scratches. It doesn't look like he's been involved in any kind of attack. So Bill also explains he has an alibi. He was at home with his kids that weekend and on the night that Kathy disappeared. And this is sad, but they do have to bring the children in for questioning. And they both confirm that they were with their father the entire weekend. Bill also tells them to check with his second in command, Staff Sergeant Nicholas Richards, because he was also with him all day. At this point, they can't spend all of their time looking at one person, especially a person that does have a very high position in the military, who has literally made that his life. He's not the type of person that would just go around doing things wrong. This man lives for perfection. So they decide to go interview some of his colleagues, people that were on his team at work, and they all tell police that Bill would have nothing to do with anything like this. They go to the Lackland Air Force Base and they interview Nicholas. He confirms that yes, he was with Bill all day on Sunday, hanging out at his place with the kids. Meanwhile, they are getting even more critical information elsewhere. So they turn their attention from Bill to someone else, the other man in Kathy's life. They go down to the hospital and they want to interview Kathy's coworkers. They already told the investigators about the affair with Dr. Pearl. But there's more. After they tell detectives all the things I already told you, that she's infatuated with him, that she's in love with him, that they go on these vacations in the form of conferences and they parade their relationship around, it's very obvious to everyone, all the staff, that they're together. However, they're about to drop a pretty big bombshell on investigators, something that I definitely wasn't expecting to hear. Something that Kathy didn't know. She wasn't the only one. That's right. Poor Kathy risked everything to be with David, but David wasn't really risking much. He had the upper hand in this relationship. Not only the one with Kathy, but with a number of other women that he worked with. That's right. This man was hooking up with all these different nurses. He was doing the same thing he was doing to Kathy with other women, taking them to different conferences, having them over his apartment, allowing them to just fall in love with him. And none of them knew anything about the others. But it wasn't much of a surprise to the people on the outside because they're watching all of this unfold. Maybe Kathy was in denial. She didn't have a clue. Or maybe she was just so blinded by her infatuation that she didn't realize what was really going on. She had no idea what the truth was, because there's more. And this part makes me so mad. I was already mad about the cheating. I was mad about what Kathy was doing behind Bill's back. But now I feel bad for Kathy. I feel like this poor woman, she was manipulated, she was tricked. And essentially, I feel like her whole world was turned around on a promise that was never real. It takes two to tango. I'm sure you've heard that before. And it wasn't just Kathy. This man knew what he was doing because he had done it time and time again. He had used his place of power to pretty much entice these nurses to come home with him and begin these relationships. And it turns out he would tell every woman that he was going through a separation, and all along, that wasn't the case. The shocking part of it all had just come to Kathy. She had just found out that David was living a lie. Because when she filed for divorce from Bill, she was excited about it. And the first person she wanted to share that excitement with was David. When she met with him to let him know the news, he said he wasn't ready to settle down with her. And Kathy was crushed. She did not understand what was going on. For all we know, her very first relationship in life could have been Bill. She wanted answers, so she started to dig into his life. And that's when she found out about all of the other women. He didn't have any intention of being committed to Kathy. He was just stringing her along like he does with every other woman. In fact, he wasn't even going through a divorce at all. He didn't have any plans to leave his wife. She had no idea that any of this was going on. They were happily married as far as she was concerned. David was actually a pretty perfect husband. Aside from his cheating, he did everything for his wife. She had the house, the car, the kids, anything she wanted, the lavish lifestyle. Kathy confronted David. And at this point, she's desperate. Desperate times call for desperate measures. She's now threatening to expose David to his wife. She would do anything to make David hers. She said, if you don't divorce your wife the way you told me you would and be with me, I'm going to go tell her. I'm going to tell her about me and you, and I'm going to tell her about everything else I found out. But David was bold, and he said, no, go ahead. I'm not leaving my wife. This has got to be an incredible situation to be in, to find yourself in. You get desperate, and Kathy was in this moment. She probably thought, if I tell his wife, she's going to leave him. She's going to be like, out with the trash. I don't want you anymore. And then Kathy could swoop in and make David hers. And it gets worse. But first, the investigators have to call David in for questioning. But I want to turn back to the autopsy report because I left you hanging. And there's something they found that was very important. They find 4 red strands of hair on the clothing that was found next to Kathy's body. They also determined that the cause of death was strangulation. But not only that, a very important clue. Something that puts Dr. Pearl right in their crosshairs and to the top of their list of suspects. They find semen in and on Kathy's body. They determined that Kathy had sex within 24 hours of her murder, and the bruises that were found on her body were thought to be signs that there was a struggle involved, and it could have been forced intercourse against her will. An interesting fact that I heard in this case that I hadn't heard in any of the other ones that I've done is that when they examined the contents of Kathy's stomach, there was Chinese food that wasn't digested. This meant that she had just eaten a short time before her death. Also, there were ant bites on her legs, and the ant activity in that area happens during the day. So that meant, if they're trying to establish a timeline, that Kathy was probably placed in that location in or around the early morning hours. So I'm talking like it's still dark out, early morning, like into Monday, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. This meant that Kathy died on Sunday night, the night that she went missing, the night that Bill couldn't find her, and specifically around dinner time on Sunday night. When they took those 4 strands of red human hair, they put them under a microscope and they noticed that the hairs had no roots. And that's when they usually take the part of the DNA from the root and they use it to establish a positive DNA match. They can't do that in this case, but not only that. When they magnified the strands at 100 times, they noticed that the hair was actually dyed. This was important because now they had something that they could compare to potential suspects. Yes, they're not naturally red. Someone has dyed them red. They don't have the root on them, so they can't, 100% match someone, but they could take someone else's hairs that they might think are involved in this, set them side by side, magnify them, and see if there's a match. But beyond that, there was nothing else left behind at this crime scene for them to go on. And we're talking 1986, forensic testing was sort of in its infancy. They didn't have much to go on as far as comparative analysis is concerned, but now before I go back to Dr. David Pearl and him being called in for questioning, there was something that happened when police arrived at Kathy's apartment to take a look at the premises. Her car is still missing. They haven't located it yet, but they do find that note on the door that Bill left, and they open it up and just that he refers to the fact she wasn't there, that he has the kids, that they're safe, that she could call him or come pick them up as soon as she got home. But now they're actually canvassing that apartment complex. They're going door to door and they're asking anyone if they saw anything out of the ordinary, and it turns out there was something peculiar happening over there in regard to Kathy's next door neighbor, a man named Vincent. He had happened to be a nurse at the same hospital that worked closely with Kathy, and this man is gone. He left town. He moved out of the apartment the same day that Kathy went missing, and he didn't even give any appropriate notice to work. They didn't even have a forwarding address to send him his last paycheck, and they thought that was very suspicious. But not only that, another neighbor comes forward and says that she saw an unfamiliar red-headed woman come knocking on Kathy's door the day after her disappearance. No one answered the door, so this woman just walked away without saying a word. Remember, there were 4 strands of red hair found on Kathy's clothing, so this is strange. They make it a point to focus their attention on trying to locate both of these individuals. Meanwhile, they get Dr. David Pearl in for questioning, but guess what? He's not alone. His wife Linda is with him. Yes, the supportive wifey is right by his side. Not only that, David doesn't seem fazed when he hears that Kathy has been killed. His demeanor is cold, and he reacts to the questions with precise answers, not giving up too much information. He does quickly and simply and cut and dry admit that he had an affair. He does this in front of his wife, probably already told her. And he says, yes, I was with Kathy that weekend, and I was with her on Saturday night. He may have been the last person to see her alive. While David's admitting all this, Linda is by his side, and it's clear to detectives that she has no intention of leaving her wealthy doctor husband. It's so painfully obvious that she's not going to leave him that they even start to think she may have been involved in some way. Jealousy is definitely a huge motivator, not to mention the way that Kathy was killed. Strangulation can be a personal crime. This could have been related to the love triangle that Kathy unknowingly found herself in. Detectives think Linda has way more to lose than anyone else. She would lose her husband, her luxury lifestyle. And it turns out David doesn't even stay at that apartment that he brings women to. No, he comes home to Linda every single night. They wonder if David and Linda were in on it together. They think that maybe Kathy was being silenced. Detectives try to press the couple and they clam up. They tell them, we're not talking about anything else unless we have an attorney. And that's not a good sign. The interview ended so abruptly. So now detectives have to turn back to the evidence that they already have, the information they gathered about the suspicious redhead and the neighbor. It turns out the neighbor just happened to get out of a relationship that same weekend. He and his boyfriend got into an argument the weekend that Kathy was murdered. So he picked up and he moved away to another part of Texas. His leaving had nothing to do with Kathy's death. Just a coincidence. But what about the redhead? That can't be a coincidence, right? They found red hairs at the scene, but it turns out that that was a coworker. They dropped by to check on Kathy the day that she didn't show up for work. Still doesn't explain the red hairs on the clothing, but let's move forward. A week after finding Kathy's body, her car is finally located. It was abandoned in a parking lot nearby. They didn't find anything of significance inside the vehicle. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything to move forward on, and the case goes cold. No one is connected to Kathy's murder for 2 whole years. 2 years go by without any answers. Kathy's mother, Nadine, and sister, Darlene, are at their wits' end. They decide to hire their own private investigator named Tom Bevins. He's actually known as Detective Death. He's the one that families go to when police cannot find their loved one's killers. They have faith in Tom. They think that he's going to be the one to track this killer down. The first thing he does is he goes back all the way down that line of any suspects that they had, and he also wants all of the personal items that were collected from Kathy's apartment. There were personal items taken from Kathy's apartment, and they've been stored as evidence. During the 2 years that the case was cold, Bill was remarried to a woman named Beverly, and he and the children moved to Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. Dr. Pearl is still working as the director of the OBGYN department at the hospital, and no one has been charged in Kathy's murder. As Tom is sifting through all of Kathy's personal effects, a diary catches his eye. It's more of a date book because it's something that she used to keep track of her daily activities, her thoughts, everything. And it was very important to her. She never left home without it. She uses it every single day. Tom goes through every single entry, and 2 of them have additional notations on them that stand out to him. One said, "Went to Bill's ball game. Lisa was there." By the way, some shows I watched said this woman's name was Lisa, and others said Shannon. I'm going to go with Lisa since one of the reports that I relied on for factual information had other things correct, while others did not, and the one that was correct used Lisa, so Lisa it is. Tom wants to know who this Lisa is. Why would Kathy be writing down another woman's name? And this was in the same time frame that things were going downhill in her marriage to Bill, sometime in the spring of 1986. The other passage that stood out simply stated, quote, "Numerous calls and nights out, passing information around concerning the WAPS testing. Bill has all the questions for the test," unquote. Tom has no idea what this test was, but I referred to it in the beginning. It's the Weighted Airman Promotion Test, which all military personnel must pass in order to gain promotion. Armed with this new information, Tom tries to track down Lisa. His first stop, Lackland Air Force Base. Tom calls and asks if anyone knows if there is a Lisa there that was connected to Bill or Kathy. Sure enough, someone puts him in contact with a Lisa Johnson. Lisa was a young cadet that was enlisted while Bill was a drill sergeant. She was very pretty, and she spent a lot of time around Bill. She was actually one of his biggest fans. It's true. She was one of those women at Bill's softball game that Kathy attended, the ones that were giving him a little more attention than usual, and it was obvious to those around Bill that Lisa had a thing for him. Bill was off limits, not only because he was married, but because of his high position. And that was exciting for a young woman like Lisa. She actually made it her mission to somehow get close to him, like coming out to his softball games and cheering him on And she was known to be wild and fun and exciting. And she would just come to these games and cheer him on, give him a big hug, tell him he's doing great, build up his ego. Actually, many people who didn't know Bill and Kathy thought that Bill and Lisa were a couple. They were seen a number of times on and off base. So everyone was aware that Kathy was seeing Dr. Pearl, but this was the first time they heard that Bill was seeing anyone. And now he's already remarried to yet another woman, so it's a little confusing. Tom gets in touch with Lisa and he tells her what the call is in reference to, and she immediately gets emotional. She admits, I had a sexual relationship with Bill. There were times when Bill was going through things with Kathy, and this woman would attempt to come to his rescue. She inflated his ego and she built him up. And one afternoon, she decided to make her move. She knew that Bill and Kathy had gone into an argument, so she invited Bill back to her place, and that was the first time of many that they were intimate. Well, that's against the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Bill was not supposed to be engaging in this type of conduct. It could cost him his career. So they did what they could to keep it quiet, and as fulfilling as it was to just fill this void that Bill had with his wife leaving him, Lisa was merely a distraction. It didn't fix anything. Bill's relationship with Lisa was just one of convenience. She was there, and he just needed a warm body. However, Bill's relationship with Lisa was one of the things that pushed Kathy to divorce him. Yes, I know, she was also having an affair. But it turns out, as investigators were digging deeper and interviewing her coworkers and her family, Bill was not a nice man. Bill was controlling. He was belittling. He did this to her for years. They were married for 8 years, and most of those years consisted of Bill controlling every aspect of Kathy's life, and she had had enough. Her family described her as very soft and caring and generous and sweet, and all she wanted was a man to love her. All she wanted was to raise her children and be with someone who actually cared. And it's sad that in the end, she falls for a guy who doesn't. But all the while, Bill is also having an affair. When she witnessed the two of them together at that ball game, she knew in her gut it was a sign to call it quits and move on. When Tom questioned Lisa, she immediately says that she's going to need an attorney. But with her attorney present, she begins to tell Tom what she knows. She says that Bill had told her he wanted to kill Kathy. And it wasn't because of the affair. It was because of another kind of cheating. That's when Lisa shined light onto another passage from the diary, the one regarding Bill knowing the answers to the WAPS test. Lisa was insinuating that Bill was cheating on the exam. This is huge. It was too much for Tom to take on by himself. Since these cheating allegations involve the Air Force, they had to call in Dr. Charles McDowell. He joins the investigation as part of the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigations. Together, him and Tom uncover even more information about Bill. For one, he took out a $315,000 life insurance policy on Kathy 7 months before her murder. That time frame isn't as suspicious as some time frames that we've talked about and that I've seen, but he was living off of this money with his new bride, Beverly, and they definitely flaunted it. When they pressed Lisa about the WAPS answers, she caved. She had to. This was vital information and way bigger than they thought. It turns out that this man who walked around all high and mighty wasn't just a cheater in the bedroom. He wasn't just a cheater when it came to ranking in the Air Force. He was running an entire cheating scam. Yes. Unreal. Apparently, he had gotten together with other men in the Air Force and they exchanged notes. And now they were selling the answers for a high price. This scheme was spreading all over the United States. Lisa says that Kathy knew all about it. All it would take was one phone call to the base commander, and it would ruin Bill's entire career. It would ruin his life. Apparently, the first time that Kathy asked for a divorce, she didn't have any leverage to make it happen. But the second time, she was armed with this incriminating information about her husband. And there's no doubt that he gave in to all of her demands in lieu of her revealing his illegal operation. They were running a cheating ring. And they were charging a lot. I'm talking, this was like a whole career in and of itself on the side. When they asked Lisa if she thinks Bill killed Kathy, she says, you know what? You better find Nicholas Richards. She tells them that he's involved in the cheating ring as well. Well, the cheating scandal is exposed. Nicholas is now facing a dishonorable discharge, and he's a mess. He doesn't waste any time confessing everything that he knows. The first thing he says is that he has nothing to do with her murder, but he knows who did, and he helped move the body. Oh my God. Wait till you hear this. Wait till you hear what he tells these investigators. He tells them that he talked to Bill on the phone the weekend before June 9th, 1986. Nicholas says that Bill calls him and asks him to watch the kids so that he can meet with Kathy to discuss some things about the divorce. So Nick takes the kids to dinner on Sunday. And when this man brings the kids back, Bill's like, can you tuck them in? Can you put them to bed? And after that, this is just, I can't believe that people can just do this stuff. But he calls Nick into a room. He pulls him aside, and he's standing in front of a small wooden cedar chest. And he slowly opens it up, and he reveals Kathy's dead body. And he just looks at him and he goes, you know what you need to do. Because Kathy was going to expose our scheme. She had to go. And since Nicholas is Bill's partner in this scandal, he feels like it is his responsibility to dispose of her. So he waits until it's dark. He drives out of the city. He opens up the back of his vehicle. And he dumps her on the side of the road and leaves those clothes folded beside her. However, he kept that wooden box, and he tells detectives that there are bloodstains in there. Now it makes sense. Remember Kathy's legs and arms, how they were twisted into this very unnatural position? It was because she was crammed into this small box, and once a rigor mortis set in, she was already in this awkward position, and there was nothing they could do to unravel her. This poor woman, that's horrific. And if that's not bad enough, they call in Bill's daughter. Now she's 9 years old. And when she's being interviewed again, she tells them that she knows who killed her mom. It was her dad, because he wasn't where he said he was on the night that Mommy died. She said that she woke up in the middle of the night and he was gone, and so was his car. This seems like it would be enough, but it's all circumstantial. They need a confession. And Nick agrees to wear a wire, and he makes a deal with the Air Force in exchange for getting information or a confession from Bill. He doesn't have to serve any time. Like, he's basically going to get away with his part in all this. Well, they agree. And he wears a wire. And he calls Bill up and he says, you know what? We need to talk about this scandal because I'm being demoted. They meet in person, but no matter what Nick says to try to get Bill to crack, he just changes the conversation. And Bill even tells Nicholas, you know what? You're looking rough. I'll take care of everything. He hands him an envelope of cash and tells him to get out of the country for a little while. They've got nothing concrete until Nick admits he still has the wooden chest that he placed Kathy's body in. And that is when the conversation changes. Bill freaks out. He's like, you need to get rid of it. You need to get rid of that now. So this is the evidence that the authorities need. They've got their killer. All along, it was Kathy's estranged husband, Bill. He would do anything to keep his ego intact, anything not to be found out, anything to stay on top, even kill the mother of his children. But wait, you have to hear what happens next. On July 10th, 1989, 3 years after her death, investigators arrest Bill for the murder of his wife. The trial is set for June 20th, 1990, but before the trial starts, Bill pleads guilty because he wants to avoid the death penalty. He wrote out a stipulation of facts outlining this chilling chain of events that led to his wife's murder. And I'm going to tell them to you. And I want you to tell me what you think, because I have my thoughts. But here's what he says happened. Bill said he asked Kathy to come over to his place to go through some family photos. He's insinuating that none of this was planned. When she got there and she was going through them, they got in an argument because she said she wanted to cut Bill out of the photos, and apparently she took a pair of scissors and started to do so right in front of him. That's when he said he got enraged. Because of everything, because of the cheating, because of the doctor, it was all going through his head, the divorce, the custody of the kids, the leverage that Kathy had, and she flaunted around about exposing everything, his cheating scheme, and he just snapped. He says, I didn't mean to kill her. I just started to attack her, and he knew that she was going to go to his superiors, and he was going to be charged with battery, and everything was going to end anyway, and it was going to end bad. And when this realization hit him, he just went all the way, and he ended up strangling her with a cord. He even had intercourse with her to make it look like it was a random attack. Bill was sentenced to life in prison, but in an unexpected turn of events, the military decides that they're going to take over the case, and they gave him 60 years instead at the disciplinary barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Wow. He goes from the death penalty being on the table, to life in prison, to the military taking over and getting 60 years, and he was eligible for parole since 1998, and I hate to tell you this, I really do, but he was actually released just last year in May of 2021. So Bill walks free, only serving 32 years. Nicholas Richards didn't get charged with anything. The only thing that happened to him was he was dishonorably discharged, and I'm shocked. This beautiful young mother of two is taken away for reasons that should not warrant murder. It's true that she made mistakes, but that should never be the answer. She left behind her two precious little children, and they will forever live with the fact that they lost both of their parents when Bill made that fateful decision to take Kathy's life. What are your thoughts on this one? On everything? The reason I asked specifically about the cheating was because in my last video about Latrice, which you can find in the description box and also post it here at the end of the video, I got a lot of comments that were victim blaming. They said, Latrice cheated. She deserved it. If she didn't go over there and cheat on her husband, then she wouldn't have died. I don't think that's the case here. Bill was the cheater. He was cheating on the test. He was running an illegal scheme for his own power and his own ego, and really for himself, because he wouldn't really let Kathy do much of anything. Kathy, according to Bill, wasn't killed because she was cheating. It was because she was going to expose what he was doing. So I want your thoughts. Murder's never the answer in my eyes. It's another sad one for me anytime children lose their mother. And I thank you so very much for being here with me today again. And I want to thank MyHeritage one last time for sponsoring this video. Thank you so much. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.